What's going on? Why isn't the groom here yet? The noisy chatter around me filled my ears. I lifted my head and looked toward the factory's big cafeteria, decorated so festively it almost hurt to look at. That's when I realized I had been reborn. I was back on the day of my wedding with David Simmons. The ceremony should have started already, but the groom still hadn't arrived. The guests, who had come to celebrate the factory's double wedding, were whispering among themselves, their curious eyes darting in my direction. "Sweetheart, don't worry," my mom said softly, wiping the tears from my face. Maybe something just held him up. Looking at her gentle, loving face, my tears only flowed harder. In my previous life, after David abandoned me, my parents endured endless ridicule and gossip in this small town. When I died young, they spent their old age lonely and helpless, suffering until the end. "Mom," I said quietly, wiping my face with my sleeve, "you don't have to wait anymore. David Simmons ran away with Rachel White." My parents froze, their expressions full of disbelief. I forced a faint smile at them, then turned and walked toward the other side of the cafeteria. There were supposed to be 2 weddings held here today. Mine with David Simmons and Rachel White's with Ethan Foster. It was meant to be a day of double happiness for the factory. But fate decided otherwise. My fiancé ran away with someone else's bride. I saw the anger on my parents' faces and felt the weight of everyone's stares. Taking a deep breath, I walked straight up to Ethan, who had also just been abandoned by his fiancée. I reached out my hand and said calmly, "Comrade Ethan, how about we get married instead?" Ethan lifted his dull, lifeless eyes toward me, then smiled faintly. "From now on," he said quietly, "we're revolutionary partners. Comrade Lisa, I'll be counting on you." Under the stunned gazes of all the factory workers, Ethan and I walked hand in hand onto the stage. This time, I wasn't going to be the foolish girl who silently endured blame and pity. I picked up the microphone and said clearly, "Everyone, today was supposed to be the wedding day of 2 couples. But since David Simmons couldn't let go of his old love, Rachel White, the 2 of them ran away together. As a member of this factory, I can't stand to see everyone's hard work and preparation go to waste. So today, I'll be marrying another person who was left behind, Comrade Ethan Foster. Please everyone, enjoy the food and celebration." Down below, Ethan's father was the first to start clapping, his face serious but steady. Seeing the factory director take the lead, the others followed, pushing down their curiosity and offering their congratulations instead. Soon, the cafeteria was once again filled with cheerful voices and laughter. As for David's parents, their faces were as dark as soot, yet they still forced smiles and clapped stiffly along with the others. That night, everything outside was silent, and even the air inside the room felt still. The Foster family had prepared a spacious house for the newlyweds, something that should have made anyone envious, but now, in this big empty house, there were only the 2 of us. The quiet felt almost suffocating. Unable to stand the heavy silence, I tried to say something, anything to break it. "You're reborn, aren't you?" Ethan suddenly asked, his tone calm but strangely certain. I froze, staring at him in shock. Then I nodded, remembering that he couldn't see me. "Yeah," I admitted softly. "I didn't want to be that pitiful person I was before, so I used you. I'm sorry." Ethan's lips curved into a faint smile, and his sharp features softened. "It's all right," he said gently. "I didn't want to be pitied either. I guess we're in the same boat. 2 people, both abandoned, both refusing to live the same miserable fate again. We understood each other without needing to say more." That night, Ethan didn't sleep on the bed. Instead, he laid a blanket on the floor and made a space for himself there. Lying on my side, I watched his still figure under the dim light, perfectly straight and proper, and I couldn't help but let out a quiet sigh. No matter what happens, things can't possibly be worse than they were in my previous life. At least this time, Ethan Foster seems like a dependable man. Besides, with his father being the deputy director of the factory, I know he has someone looking out for him. Because the factory granted us 3 days of wedding leave, I spent those days either reading at home or accompanying Ethan to visit an old Chinese doctor for acupuncture. It was nice not having to face the stares or the pitying looks from people outside. The more time I spent around Ethan, the more I realized that although he couldn't see, he was remarkably composed and well-mannered. Whether in his speech or demeanor, he carried himself with quiet confidence and grace. That made me curious. What kind of life had he lived, and what had caused him to lose his sight? While I found myself thinking more and more about Ethan, the man who had abandoned me, David Simmons, barely crossed my mind anymore. 3 days went by in a flash. Early in the morning, I carried my lunchbox and went to work at the factory. Remembering how Ethan had reminded me before I left, telling me to come home early, made my steps feel lighter than usual. "Lisa Jameson, I never thought you could be such a cruel woman." A furious voice suddenly rang out from behind me in the alley. I turned around, and there he was. My former fiancé, David Simmons, the man who had left me on our wedding day. I couldn't believe he had the nerve to show his face here after just a few days. "Comrade David," I said coldly, "if I remember correctly, the one who was abandoned at the wedding was me. And now I'm the cruel one?" I stared at him, the man I had once loved for over 10 years, and anger bubbled up inside me. "Don't twist the truth," he snapped. "Rachel's return to city application had already been approved. Wasn't it your family that pulled strings to have it revoked because we left the wedding?" I laughed bitterly. "Rachel isn't like you think. She doesn't need me to live her life for her." "She's not like you," he shouted. "You're strong, you can survive anywhere, but Rachel is a delicate girl. She suffered so much in the countryside, and just when she finally found a way to return to the city, how could you be so heartless?" Hearing him defend Rachel White so fiercely, I couldn't help but let out a cold laugh. "David Simmons, have you forgotten why Rachel was sent to the countryside in the first place?" My words struck him like a slap. His face turned red, then pale, and after a long moment he stammered, "Rachel's just a weak woman. It wasn't really her fault. She didn't want things to turn out that way. And besides, she already apologized to me." I couldn't hold back anymore. I rolled my eyes so hard it almost hurt. In my past life, how on earth had I managed to love a man like this for over 10 years? And worse, I'd even died depressed because of their so-called great love. David, Rachel, and I had all grown up together in the mechanical factory's housing compound. Unlike me, loud, straightforward, and careless, Rachel White had always been everyone's little princess. The Simmons and White families had been close friends for generations, and people had always said that one day, David and Rachel were destined to be together. Because of that, I buried my feelings for David deep in my heart. Everything changed about 5 years ago. One day, a group of officials suddenly stormed into the Simmons house and took the whole family away. Not long after, news spread that the Simmons family had committed a serious offense and would likely face severe punishment. The very next day, while all the neighbors were trying to pull strings and find ways to help them, the White family issued a public statement declaring that they had absolutely no connection to the Simmons family. And even that wasn't enough. They still didn't feel safe. That same night, they secretly contacted the youth placement office and arranged for Rachel to be sent down to the countryside, just to make sure the two families would have no further ties. Seeing the person I'd loved since childhood suffering like that, I couldn't bear it. I begged my father to help the Simmons family. Out of pity for his daughter, my father pulled every favor he could, using all his connections to investigate and help them. Fortunately, it turned out the accusations against the Simmons family were unfounded. Before long, they were released unharmed, without losing their positions. In fact, over the years, they even climbed higher. Mr. Simmons eventually became the deputy director of the factory. I still remember that day. David held my hand, his face full of tenderness, and said, "Lisa, I promise I'll never let you down in this life. If I ever break that promise, may I die a miserable death." Die a miserable death, huh? I thought bitterly. Maybe some vows really do deserve to come true. "Lisa Jameson, you'd better tell your father to approve Rachel's return to city permit, or I swear I won't let you off." David's furious voice snapped me back to reality. I curled my lips into a faint smile, turned around, and walked away. When a dog barks at me, I can't exactly bark back. But maybe it's time that disobedient dog learned who its master really is. "Lisa, are you okay?" As soon as I stepped into the office, my best friend Linda Lee came over, looking worried. I noticed several coworkers sneaking glances at me, their eyes full of curiosity. I smiled brightly and said loud enough for everyone to hear. I'm doing great. Ethan Foster is 10,000 times better than I ever imagined. I'm very happy right now. Maybe because I sounded so confident, the atmosphere in the office immediately relaxed. Sister Wang, our outspoken senior colleague, marched right up to me and started cursing under her breath. I knew it. That pale little Rachel White was never a good person. When trouble came, she ran for her life. Fine. But then she had the nerve to come back and steal someone else's man. I heard her parents are furious. She threw away a good match with the deputy director's son, and now she's ruined her family's reputation on top of it. Another coworker chimed in. That's right. I heard the Simmons family just brought them back yesterday. They were too ashamed to hold another wedding, so they're just planning to register the marriage quietly. Before long, everyone was gossiping heatedly, completely forgetting about me. Watching my coworkers chatting so animatedly, I let out a quiet sigh and turned back to my work. Now that Ethan couldn't see, it was up to me to work hard and earn money for our family. This time, I didn't want my parents to worry about their disappointing daughter anymore. I wanted to live my life well. Over the next few days, David didn't show up again. According to Sister Wang from the factory's information department, he'd been beaten so badly by his father, the deputy director, that one of his legs was broken. If it hadn't been for his mother stepping in, he probably would have been crippled for life. As for Rachel White, she hadn't shown her face since. But honestly, I didn't waste a single thought on either of them. My mind was completely occupied with what the old doctor had told us a few days ago, that Ethan's eyes were responding well to treatment. I couldn't stop thinking about it. On my way home that evening, I was humming a little tune to myself, planning to prepare a warm compress for his eyes later. I even found myself imagining what it would be like if he regained his sight, what kind of expression he'd have when he looked at me with those deep, sharp eyes of his. Still smiling, I stepped out of the factory gate and froze. Standing there, pale-faced and breathless, was David Simmons. Gone was the furious, vengeful man I'd faced last time. Now, he looked desperate, anxious even. "Lisa," he blurted out, "how could you marry a cripple just to spite me? Listen to me, go file for divorce right away. I know I already have Rachel, but I can't just watch you ruin your life like this." He reached out to grab my hand, but I yanked it away hard. By now, a crowd of coworkers had gathered around us, eager for a show. "David Simmons," I said coldly, "are you out of your mind? Not long ago, you ran away with Rachel White. Then you screamed at me over her return permit without even asking what really happened. And now what is this? Another performance?" I frowned at him, completely unable to figure out what went on inside his head. "Lisa," he said, his voice trembling, "Rachel was crying and saying she couldn't marry someone ugly and disabled like Ethan. I couldn't stop her, but honestly, she wasn't wrong. Ethan Foster, a man who no one even knows what he's been through, he's blind. Sure, he's the deputy director's son, but who knows what kind of shady things he did to end up that way. You should listen to me and divorce him before it's too late." I stared at him, utterly disgusted by his shamelessness, as he stood there, insulting Ethan Foster, the man who had done nothing but treat me with respect. Everyone around us was nodding along with David, agreeing with his every word. My anger flared instantly, and before I could stop myself, my hand flew across his face with a sharp slap. "Don't you dare judge Ethan with your filthy, twisted minds," I said, my voice trembling with fury. "You don't deserve to even speak his name." David looked completely stunned. He clearly hadn't expected that the girl who'd always obeyed him without question would actually hit him. His face twisted in rage as he pointed at me and shouted, "Lisa Jameson, I was doing this for your own good. If you can't tell good intentions from bad, that's on you. But you dare hit me. Rachel was right about you. You're a shameless woman. Only a blind cripple would ever want someone like you. What a waste of my kindness." Before I could respond, a deep, calm voice spoke from behind me. "Our marriage, Comrade Simmons, is none of your business. If you've got spare time, you'd be better off going home to your wife and your child." I turned around, and my breath caught. A tall man was walking toward me through the crowd, his steps steady, his expression clear and composed. My eyes widened in shock. Forgetting everything else, I rushed forward and grabbed Ethan Foster's arm. Why did you come by yourself? Did you bump into anything? Are you hurt? I asked anxiously. He turned his head toward me, and a gentle smile spread across his face. It wasn't until that moment that I noticed something. His eyes. There was light in them. I could see my reflection shimmering in his gaze. I stared at him, hardly daring to believe it. Ethan, you can see? You really can see? Before Ethan could answer, a harsh, mocking voice cut through the murmurs around us. That's impossible. There's no way this man is Ethan Foster. Lisa Jameson, I know you care about your reputation, but you can't just grab some random guy off the street to save face. The crowd fell silent for a moment. Then people started whispering again. Most of them had attended our wedding banquet, but few had actually seen Ethan clearly. After all, he and his family had only recently returned to town, and he'd barely appeared in public since. No one knew what he really looked like. So now, David Simmons refused to believe that the tall, composed, and striking man standing before us was the same blind cripple his beloved Rachel had cried so desperately to avoid marrying. If you're mad at me, Lisa, David said hoarsely, you can yell at me, hit me, whatever you want, but don't ruin yourself just to get back at me. I actually laughed out loud, not from amusement but sheer disbelief. Oh, anything I do to you is fine? I said coolly. Then I won't hold back. With that, I raised my hand again. Once, twice, 3 times. Slap, slap, slap. Sound echoed through the crowd. David's face swelled before everyone's eyes. My hand tingled and went numb, but I lifted it anyway, showing the crowd. You all saw it, right? He told me to hit him. The onlookers burst into shocked murmurs. David, dazed and humiliated, suddenly lunged forward as if to strike me. Try touching my wife. Ethan's voice cut through the air, low and cold. Before David could get close, Ethan stepped in front of me, catching his arm in one swift motion. Though David was tall, he looked frail compared to Ethan's broad, steady frame. One was all bones and bluster, the other all quiet strength. Ethan gave his arm a sharp twist and flung it aside. David stumbled back several steps, barely catching himself by grabbing one of the spectators. His face turned so red with rage and embarrassment that I thought he might faint right then and there. Only then did I snap out of my daze. My heart was pounding as I hurriedly pushed through the crowd and headed for the exit. Lisa, wait for me. Ethan called after me. His voice made my steps quicken. I barely made it to the factory gate before he caught up, reaching out to grab my hand. What's wrong? He asked softly. I can see now. Doesn't that make you happy to see me? I looked up at him, at those clear eyes focused completely on me, and felt my face grow hot. We'd been living together for more than a month, and I thought I knew him well. But seeing Ethan like this, standing tall and looking straight at me with that quiet, steady confidence, it left me completely at a loss for words. For a long moment, I just stood there, too nervous to look up. Finally, I lifted my head and asked softly, Do I look like what you imagined? Ethan smiled faintly. Back when I couldn't see, he said, I imagined your face 1,000 times. But none of those images could compare to the moment I actually saw you. The instant I regained my sight, the first thing I wanted was to see you as fast as I could. His gaze was steady and burning with intensity, making my cheeks grow hot. Let's go home, Comrade Foster, I said, pretending to sound calm. Tell me what you want for dinner. Comrade Jameson will cook whatever you like. I gave his hand a playful shake, then turned toward the direction of our home, trying to hide how flustered I really felt. But halfway through dinner, something he'd said earlier popped back into my mind. Wait, I asked suddenly, why did you tell David to go home and spend time with his wife and kid? They already have a child? Ethan nodded calmly. Yeah, they do. From the looks of it, the baby will be born in about 5 or 6 months. So that's how it was. In my previous life, I died too early to ever know the truth. But Ethan had lived much longer. He must have known everything. We'd lived in the same factory compound. Even if he hadn't gone looking for gossip, he couldn't have avoided hearing about them. In that last life, just a few months after David and Rachel got married, she gave birth to a son. There had been plenty of rumors, of course, but the Simmons family insisted the child was premature. No one believed it. People just didn't dare say anything out loud because of David's father's position. But behind closed doors, they talked endlessly. Realizing that David and Rachel had already been together long before our wedding made my stomach twist in disgust. While he'd been whispering sweet words to me, planning our marriage and swearing I was the only one he'd ever love, he'd already been rolling around with her. How could someone be that shamelessly fake? And I'd loved him for over 10 years. The thought made me sick. I wasn't blind before. I was a fool. Stop thinking about it, Ethan said gently, giving my hand a firm squeeze. Regret is for people who've done something wrong. You haven't. Don't punish yourself for someone else's mistakes. I looked up at him, his calm expression illuminated by the warm light, and couldn't help but think, meeting him in this life was the luckiest thing that had ever happened to me. Ethan, I murmured, you're such a thoughtful man. Why did you stay alone in your past life? Why didn't you ever get married? He smiled faintly. Because I never met anyone who made my heart move, he said simply. Without that, marriage didn't mean anything. Then why did you decide to marry in this life? I asked shyly. He chuckled softly, clearly seeing through my question. Instead of answering, he suddenly swept me off my feet and into his arms. My wife, he said, his voice teasing and low. Maybe I just haven't made my love clear enough. In that case, I'll just have to show you how much I mean it. He looked down at me with that half smile, his Adam's apple shifting as he spoke. I found myself staring, my fingers twitching with the urge to touch it. You really are. His voice came out husky and deep, and before I realized what I was doing, my hand was already resting on his throat. My face went crimson in an instant, heat flooding up my neck. Everything blurred together. His warm breath, my pounding heartbeat, the rain starting to pour outside the window. Under Ethan's intense gaze, I slowly closed my eyes. The rain drummed harder and harder through the night, tapping endlessly against the window until dawn began to break and the sound finally softened. The next morning, I woke with my waist sore and aching. Ethan was already up, and when he handed me a bowl of brown sugar eggs, all my irritation melted away. I could only roll my eyes helplessly at him before smiling. After breakfast, I grabbed my things to head to work as usual. But when I stepped outside, I was surprised to find Ethan waiting for me in the courtyard, sitting on a black 28-bar bicycle. I thought he was just going to see me off, so I hopped on the back seat and wrapped my arms gently around his waist. The morning breeze brushed against my face as the bicycle wobbled slightly down the road, carrying us together toward the mechanical factory. It wasn't until Ethan locked the bicycle and walked into the factory with me that I realized something was off. All right, I said suspiciously, narrowing my eyes. Be honest, what's going on? He smiled, his tone casual. Even though my injuries have healed, I can't handle the intensity of military training anymore. So I applied for a transfer out of the army, and as it happens... He pointed toward the main factory building with an almost boyish grin. This factory is the unit that accepted my transfer. I stared at him, speechless, then reached out and pinched his waist hard. Of course, coming from a top military unit, your secret-keeping skills are really something. Yes, Ethan Foster had been missing for many years, but unlike the rumors that claimed he'd been drifting around doing who knows what, the truth was very different. He'd actually been taken in by a kind family, though they weren't well off. After his adoptive parents passed away, he voluntarily enlisted in the army, and through his own skill and determination, rose to become the youngest regimental commander in history before retiring from service. I had learned all of this gradually, over the many quiet evenings we'd spent talking. Every time he spoke of the past, I felt a pang of pain for what he'd been through, but even more admiration for how far he'd come entirely on his own. I believed that even if his father hadn't found him and brought him back, Ethan's life still would have been remarkable. And so, our days settled into a gentle rhythm, going to work together, coming home together. As for David Simmons, he still worked at the factory too, but since it was one of the biggest state-run plants in the city, it wasn't easy to run into him unless I tried. Eventually, the gossip and schadenfreude surrounding us just faded away. Rachel White, on the other hand, kept completely out of sight. The Simmons family must have pulled some strings to get her return to city permit approved for the baby's sake, but they hadn't been able to find her a proper work unit to accept her. Even though David's father was the deputy director, The factory system was strict. One job per position. If you tried to sneak someone in through connections, a report letter would land on the disciplinary committee's desk that same night. So Rachel stayed quiet, never showing up in front of us again. I honestly thought our life would just keep going like that, calm and steady, until that day. It was near the end of the year, and the factory's production department was buzzing with overtime work. Ethan was worried I'd get cold waiting for him in the office, so he told me to go home first. I walked home alone, flashlight in hand, the narrow beam of light swaying with each step. The wind howled through the trees on both sides of the road, making the branches rattle and hiss. The sound made me uneasy, and the part of me that now half believed in mysterious things couldn't help quickening my pace. "What are you doing? If someone sees us, we're finished." I froze. The sharp whisper of a woman's voice came from up ahead in the alley near our home. Peering into the dim light, I saw two figures, and I knew that voice instantly. I clapped a hand over my mouth to stifle the gasp rising in my throat, then crouched quietly behind a wall, peeking through the shadows at the scene before me. "You married someone else while carrying my child," the man hissed. "You put a green hat this big on my head. How the hell am I supposed to swallow that?" His voice was low, but every word hit like a thunderclap in my ears. "If it weren't for me, Rachel, you'd still be starving in that godforsaken countryside," he sneered. "I fed you, took care of you, and this is how you repay me? By crawling back here and seducing your old flame?" Rachel White's voice trembled. I'll give you the money. Just give me a few days." "I'm not asking for much," he snapped. "You get me 500 yuan. Once I have it, I'll leave and go back to the countryside for the new year. But if you don't have it in 3 days..." He paused, his tone turning vicious. "Then pack your things and get out of here. Don't ever show your face again, or I swear we'll go down together." Rachel's voice suddenly turned sickly sweet. "Come on, baby, don't be mad. You know I was just teasing. You know I'd give you anything you wanted if you just asked." "Then give me a kiss," the man said, his voice dropping into something dark and possessive. From the shadows I frowned, hearing the sound of their low, ambiguous laughter echo through the narrow alley. My stomach turned. Quietly, I tiptoed away, careful not to make a sound. I could hardly believe what I'd just seen. Rachel White, bold enough to sneak around like that, even now. I wondered if David Simmons had any idea what kind of woman he'd loved so blindly for more than 10 years. As for me, I felt nothing but satisfaction. In my past life, David had spent decades raising a child that wasn't even his. What a joke. And I, foolish me, had died early because of those two, leaving my parents to suffer the unbearable pain of losing their daughter before her time. But heaven must have taken pity on me. Not only had I been given a second chance at life, but I'd also learned the truth about everything. If I didn't make good use of that knowledge, wouldn't it be a waste of this second chance? The thought made a cold determination flash through my eyes. That night, Ethan Foster and I sat together and discussed exactly how we would return the favor to those who had wronged us. Soon enough, New Year's Eve arrived. Thanks to the factory's strong performance that year, the management committee decided to hold the annual New Year's dinner in the factory cafeteria, a celebration to thank everyone for their hard work. Of course, everyone was delighted. Free food, free drinks, and no need to spend their own money on meat or tickets. No one was complaining. As the families of the factory's director and deputy director, Ethan and I naturally sat at the same table as the Simmons family. "So, this must be Brother Foster," Rachel White said, holding her wine glass as she stood and approached Ethan with a forced smile. I was young and foolish back then. My parents told me to marry a man I'd never met, and I panicked. She didn't even glance at David Simmons's dark expression beside her. Was she regretting it now that she'd seen Ethan in person? "Comrade White, you're too polite," Ethan said mildly, raising his own glass. "If you hadn't run away from your wedding, I never would have met my wife. So really, I should be thanking you." With that, he poured the wine from his glass onto the floor. Rachel's face turned an ugly shade of red. "Brother Foster, don't let Lisa fool you," she said quickly, her voice shaking with anger. "She's been pretending since she was a child. Everything you see now is an act. Otherwise, why do you think David left her on their wedding day after they'd known each other for over 10 years? Her words made the entire table fall silent. Even their parents, seated beside them, stiffened in embarrassment. Mentioning the runaway wedding in front of everyone was like slapping herself across the face. "Are you out of your mind?" David hissed, grabbing her arm. Ignoring her pregnant belly, he yanked her back down into her seat, his expression as black as coal. "Do you want to know why you two ran away?" Ethan asked calmly, setting his chopsticks down. His tone was cold, but every word was sharp as a knife. "Because neither of you has a shred of shame or sense. You were perfect for each other, rotten to the core. But honestly, it's a good thing you're both idiots. If you weren't, David wouldn't have been so easy for you to manipulate. And you, Rachel, you wouldn't have dared to run away while carrying another man's child." The moment his words fell, the entire cafeteria erupted in gasps. People who had been watching from a distance immediately crowded closer, eager not to miss the drama. "Ethan!" The deputy director, David's father, slammed his chopsticks onto the table, his face livid. "Watch your mouth. You can't just say things like that in public." He was furious, but so focused on defending his family's reputation that he didn't notice the way Rachel White's face had turned ghostly pale, or how she was trembling in her chair. "Mr. Simmons," Ethan said evenly, "am I making false accusations, or am I just telling the truth? You can see for yourself." He gave a slight smile, then clapped his hands twice. Out from the crowd came a man I recognized immediately, Lee Yong, the same scoundrel from the countryside who'd been arguing with Rachel that night in the alley. "I really am Rachel White's old lover from the countryside," Lee announced without hesitation. When she first got sent down there, she was all sweet and gentle, asking me to help her with farm work. Later, when she got pregnant with my child, I practically worshipped her. I would have given her my whole heart if she'd asked. But then one day she suddenly disappeared. No goodbye, no letter. Just ran off carrying my kid in her belly. The room fell dead silent for half a heartbeat. Lee was a well-known troublemaker from the rural areas, crude, shameless, and loud. And yet, when he spoke, his words were so blunt and vivid that no one dared to laugh or interrupt. That single confession hit the room like a thunderclap. The whole cafeteria had erupted into chaos, the crowd staring at David Simmons as if he were a fool. "When Rachel was with me," Lee Yong shouted, his voice cutting through the noise, "she was a pure, innocent girl. If anyone had paid me to say these things, I'd be in serious trouble." David's face darkened, his eyes flashing with threat. "Lee Yong, you're out of line," he growled at Lee. "If you think you can insult me like this, think again. You have no idea who you're messing with." I couldn't help but laugh. Even if he were right, he couldn't afford to lose face here. So all he could do was grit his teeth and try to keep the situation under control. "Do you have any evidence to prove what you're saying?" I asked, smiling at Lee Yong, who looked a little hesitant. "Evidence?" Lee stammered. "How could I possibly have any?" Hearing him mention evidence, Rachel, who had been shrinking into the background, suddenly shouted, her face red and angry. "What about the security department? Someone send this scoundrel to the police station. He's dragged my family into this mess." Within seconds, several members of the security department had rushed over and started dragging Lee Yong toward the exit. "Wait, I have proof. I have proof," Lee yelled desperately. "This woman," he said, his voice rising, "has 3 moles in a row on her backside." The cafeteria went completely silent. The noise died as though someone had flipped a switch. David's forehead creased, and he could no longer pretend to remain calm. He swung his hand and slapped Rachel across the face hard. "You shameless woman, you dare lie to me? No wonder you sneaked back into the city that night and poured me wine, pretending to want me. All along, you just wanted me to be your fool." Every word was accompanied by another violent slap. Within moments, Rachel's face had swollen grotesquely. She no longer looked like the delicate, fragile girl she had always appeared to be. Now, everyone could see clearly. The child Rachel was carrying was not David's. David had been abandoned by his fiancée and had no idea she was pregnant with someone else's child. Perhaps Rachel had originally only wanted to seduce him to secure a way back to the city. But she hadn't expected to actually become pregnant. Meanwhile, Rachel's parents, who had been thinking of marrying her into a wealthy family, assumed their daughter would find stability in city life. Their son had just returned, disabled though he was, and at least he wouldn't have to toil endlessly in the countryside. Both sides had used their own methods to try to control the situation. But in the end, everything fell into the hands of a single rogue from the countryside. Rachel, having grown up in comfort and indulgence, was utterly unprepared for the harsh realities of rural life. She had always gotten her way by simply being spoiled, but she had underestimated her surroundings. The person who had confronted her wasn't some boy from the same compound who knew all her habits, but a scrappy, determined rogue who expected his due in full. And so proud Rachel White had unknowingly entangled herself with Lee Yong. Only when she could no longer tolerate him did she send a telegram to David. After overcoming countless obstacles, the two finally reunited. Faced with her tearful confessions, hearing her professed love over and over, David Simmons, who had once been full of resentment, could no longer control himself. Afterward, he held his beloved Rachel in his arms and promised that he would find a way to bring her back to the city. And I must have been waiting, full of expectation, ready to marry the man I had loved for more than 10 years. Rachel's crying continued. Fearing things might escalate, her mother finally intervened and pulled David away. I forced him back home without mercy. As for Rachel White, she lay on the ground, completely defeated. Someone helped her to her feet and took her away. Once the crowd had dispersed, Ethan and I exchanged a knowing smile. I walked over to Lee Yong and said, "You've worked hard today. Go home early." Lee Yong opened his mouth as if to protest, but then he looked at Ethan's sharp, calculating gaze. Swallowing nervously, he quietly stepped back a few paces and then turned and ran off. With only the two of us left in the cafeteria, I felt an unprecedented sense of relief and satisfaction. All those rumors that had once tormented me, the lies that had almost ruined my life, now it was their turn. That night, I slept without a single dream. The next morning, visitors came one after another to pay New Year's greetings. Each person had to talk a little about what had happened the previous night, and they couldn't resist commenting on how lucky Ethan and I were to be together. Amid the greetings and good wishes, an unexpected visitor arrived. David Simmons walked in, looking haggard and exhausted. The aunts who had been casually snacking and chatting straightened up immediately, their eyes glinting with curiosity and something else I couldn't quite read. As soon as he stepped in, David rushed toward me, trying to grab my hand. But before he could touch me, Ethan shoved him hard, sending him crashing to the floor. David looked up at Ethan, eyes bloodshot and wild. "It's my fault," he shouted, his voice cracking. "I was blind. I missed the one person in this life who truly loves me. Please, give me another chance. I'll treat you well from now on. I only made a mistake that any man in the world would make. Just forgive me this once. I'll do anything you say afterward." I stared at him, silent. He was so desperate, so unreasonably confident that he actually believed he had a right to my forgiveness. I couldn't comprehend what I had ever seen in him. "David," I said flatly, "are you in the wrong place? This isn't a recycling bin for trash." David froze at my words. "And I already have someone better," I continued, holding Ethan's hand and letting it show in front of him. "Why would I want a man whose mind and heart are both sullied? David, don't cling to the past from 10 years ago. Even though Ethan and I have only known each other for a few months, it's enough for me to know who truly values me." "Lisa, you're not this cruel," David muttered, but I could see through him. He knew me in some ways, but how could he possibly know I had died once before? I was no longer the girl I had been. "David Simmons," I said coldly, "don't make me look down on you again." Seeing my expression, David fell silent. Then he slowly stood, turned, and left. At the door, he called over his shoulder, "Ethan Foster, if you ever wrong Lisa, I will take her back." And just like that, he was gone. I couldn't help rolling my eyes. What is this? Late-blooming passion? I later heard that, as soon as the Civil Affairs office opened, David had dragged the whimpering Rachel there to finalize the divorce. As for Rachel, who had no proper claim to return to the city in the first place, she was reassigned, but because she had come back without permission, she was sent to a harsh, remote region. The Simmons family, meanwhile, was reported for abusing their power to help her return. Now, the only one left maintaining a position in the factory was David himself, which meant he would occasionally appear near me, seeing me with Ethan, looking at us as if my love were endless. Eventually, the people at the factory would jokingly tease, saying, "Lisa's really showing off now. David Simmons still hasn't moved on." But what did that have to do with me? My deputy comrade Ethan was at home, waiting and cooking for me,